What's going on, Aces? Welcome back to the channel. I hope that you guys are having a wonderful evening. So listen, I'm getting caught up on all of my content, and this episode I could not let skip, but I do want to get caught up probably, hopefully tomorrow, with the past episodes of the Real Housewives of Atlanta and Married to Medicine, okay? But for right now, since I already made a video about Kenya, I wanted to stick with it and let's get into episode 5 about last night. So I didn't want too much time to pass. So the recap starts with Shamea and Angela. They're reconciling, which is great, right? We love to see, when the housewives are actually getting along. And if you guys remember from last week, and like I said, I'll make a separate video about that, but Shamea, she extended the olive branch. She got a bottle of olive oil. And so Angela was mature enough to accept her apology. So they are at Shamea's gorgeous mansion, Sterling Hall. I'm so here for it because Shamea in the past seasons, she was a friend of, she was always holding Porsha down. And so I feel like this season, she's really one of my favorite housewives. Like, she's very down to earth. She's talked about her journey with IVF and, just how difficult things have been. But she loves her husband. He has legitimate money. Shout out to her husband who installs HVACs in Atlanta airports and airports, all throughout the country, probably throughout the world, child. Okay, because their house is gorgeous. That mansion is, she said, is one of the highest selling mansions when during the year when they bought it. So their money is long and strong. And I love that. Okay. I love that for Shamea because, again, it always seemed like she was playing second fiddle. I mean, again, she was a friend of, she didn't have a full peach yet. And she said, in past seasons, her husband really didn't want her to be on the show, or he didn't want to be featured on the show. But she said, she did what she needed to do to get her peach and her rolls, which is not stolen, by the way. Like I said, I love the fact that her and her husband, it seems like they have a great marriage. Finances are right and tight, and I love that for her. So they invite over Brit, to the house, as well as Angela, and they're talking about just reconciling, with the housewives. They basically tell Brit that she was wrong for really coming for Kenya last episode. I mean, her talking about she had a pow pow and she was, calling Kenya snippety and rude and all these things. And this, in my opinion, Brit, again, she was doing the absolute most. I don't know if it's because when Kenya met her, she was asking her about her wedding ring. It was a single like solitary band. It looked like an engagement ring if you didn't know. She didn't have an extra wedding band. But she just said it was an upgrade, and Kenya was asking like, oh, well, is it your second marriage, or just trying to find out about her. And Brittany's like, no, I've been married to the same man. This is an upgrade on my wedding ring. And so she's like, oh, okay. Again, I didn't think it was that big of a deal, but Britt thought that Kenya was being real shady, and so she got in her feelings about it, and they've been clashing ever since. So the ladies are, Angela and Shamea are sitting down talking with Britt, and just basically letting her know, like, you came on a little strong, and she did, right? She was upset that Kenya didn't really hug her at the dinner. She was upset about the ring. She was just in her feelings. In my opinion, after meeting her husband, just for that little bit that he was on camera in past episodes, and I'll talk about this, like I said, later, I feel like it's misdirected anger toward Kenya. I feel like just that one question about her ring, it kind of scratched the surface of something deeper that's going on with her husband. He seemed very dismissive of her. And so I feel like Kenya might have unknowingly hit a nerve with Brittany that she didn't know about. But anyway, they have a nice time at Shamea's house. So speaking of nice times, right? Porsha and Kenya, they meet out at a restaurant or at her salon, I'm sorry. And so, they invite Kelli. And I like Kelli. She has her restaurant, Nana's Chicken and Waffles, and she's an entrepreneur, you know, doing her thing. I'm glad to see Porsha and Kenya getting along, especially since they literally fell out, came to blows in past season reunions. So that was great. But, Kenya's just basically showing them around the salon. And I just, I feel like it's an interesting choice for Kenya. I would have thought that she would go into the beauty business, maybe like going down the line with like makeup in regards to, Rihanna and Kylie Kardashian. Because don't get me wrong, Kenya is like again, she has gorgeous hair, a gorgeous, beauty queen. She was Miss USA, but she's not a beautician. She's not a cosmetologist. So it was just an interesting business choice, in my opinion. I don't think that she should have opened like a modeling agency like Cynthia, but I think like, I don't know, something a little different than a hair spa. But nevertheless, she sunk $400,000 into it. So um, they meet the models, and they said that they're going to have like a hair competition show at her grand opening, which they do. It's very nice. But Porsha and Kelli got a chance to just talk with Kenya about her opening. They're all excited, and again, gorgeous. Purple is my favorite color, so I was here for it. She has beautiful flowers, and you guys can see in the picture. I had to I had to snap it real quick before she, flipped it up, because we don't need to see all that. We need to keep it YouTube friendly. But they're talking about Brit, and she said that she didn't invite her. She didn't uninvite her either. I really wish that Kenya would have had security escort her out at the door, or even that Brit didn't come, that they were able to sit down and talk about everything that happened at a later venue. But that didn't happen. So again, they're talking about what Brit said and how she went too far, which she did. And even Brit, acknowledges that she went too far. So again, it's unfortunate that I feel like this whole episode is just kind of, leading up to the main event at Kenya's grand opening. And it's sad, because she's like, I have too much to lose. She's like, I use Brooklyn's college fund. I'm dedicating this to my daughter. Like, everything that she does is for her daughter, which is commendable, right? That's admirable. But not holding that billboard. Like, I really wish that she was thinking about Brooklyn before she did that. Because unfortunately, the internet is forever. TV, Brooklyn's probably most likely gonna see this when she grows older. And it's like, how do you explain that lapse of judgment? Again, we're all human. I'm not trying to kick Kenya while she's down, but I wish that she would have just given pause before she acted in anger. Okay, so moving on, we meet Angela's oldest daughter, Amari. And they're sitting down in the coffee shop, and Amari tells her mom that she wants to open a coffee shop. And, her mom is like, I can just make this in my Keurig. So, and Amari's like, well, that's because you haven't had good coffee. I love a good cup of coffee. I'm not a coffee connoisseur, but Issa Rae, I believe, has, if not, I know she has one coffee shop. I don't know if she has multiple, but for the most part, I think it is a pretty, profitable business if you know what you're doing. So shout out to Amari. Um, but anyway, they're sitting down, and she's telling her about how she got into it with her grandmother and her auntie over a car. So Angela, as we know, she's a self-made millionaire. She's in the real estate business. And so Angela's mom, Amari's grandmother, was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And so Angela bought her mom a house, and she also bought her a car. And for reasons that are unknown to us, Mari chooses, instead of living with Angela and Charles, she lives with her grandmother and her auntie in the house that Angela bought. And so Amari takes the car without her grandmother's permission and they get into it. And she says that, auntie was all in my face. And, she's telling this to her mom. So Angela's saying, well, I'll talk to my sister because she won't get away with doing that, disrespecting you and getting in your face. But she's like, I'm not going to cut off my mother, right? And I commend Angela for that. Amari, for, again, like I said, reasons that are just unknown. Hopefully we'll find out later in the season. She says that, or she doesn't say it, but Angela says, she was hurt to find out that Amari got married, and she's been married for 4 months and she didn't tell her. And it's, if that wasn't, kind of mind blowing in and of itself, that Amari would get married without telling her mom. Angela says that, that her and Amari are, I should say, best friends because they essentially grew up together. Her father was unalived in Chicago, unfortunately. And so I feel like their best friendship is one-sided because who doesn't tell their mother / BFF that they got married? And then the second question that I have is your spouse in the house with your grandmother and your auntie? And does this spouse not have a car? And I have so many questions during this scene. But in my opinion, this scene was probably one of the best scenes, of this episode, because I feel like, and it's unfortunate because you never want to see anybody cry, but it was real. And I feel like Angela is trying to paint this narrative of this picture perfect family when we can see the cracks all through the story that she's trying to tell. In my opinion, Charles is not very kind to Angela. He doesn't speak kindly to her, and he's very condescending, in my opinion. Her daughter doesn't want to live with her, doesn't tell her that she's married. It's like, Angela, I mean, I don't know what her definition of a best friend is, but she may want to reevaluate her relationship with her daughter. Maybe they could, find a good counselor and sit down and really unpack what's going on, because again, there's a lot hidden. So hopefully we'll find out more as the season progresses. Okay, so then we get to Cynthia just basically, saying that her and Kenya's relationship has had its ups and downs, but Cynthia has always really been in Kenya's corner. And that's true. You know what I mean? I feel like Cynthia is somebody who is, she is, more, I don't want to say like passive, but she's more quiet and she doesn't stir up a whole lot of drama. And I feel like some people can misread that as being weak or docile. And so I feel like a lot of the ladies come for her. Nene used to really be like lightweight disrespectful, borderline disrespectful to Cynthia. I hated it, especially since Cynthia was like, oh, we need a friendship contract. I'm like, girl, this child is not your friend. I don't know. I don't call a whole lot of people my friend. I value, loyalty and honesty and transparency. And so I feel like once I read that people are being shady and, no, that's not the type of people that I roll with, but I'm not a Real Housewife. So, but I wanted Cynthia to, kind of clock Kenya's tea a little more than she did. But anyway, she's there to support her. So the ladies, they all come and show up. Miss Lawrence is there, and they got the camera crew there, they got the media there, they got just pretty much everybody who's everybody is at Kenya's grand opening. So then we have Brit and Kelli, and they're in the party van, and Brit said she's bringing her flowers, and she has a card, and she's very apologetic, and she realized that she was she took things too far, threatening Kenya with the pow pow, and she really wanted to make amends, and hopefully that they can move forward. So by the time Brit gets there, well, before Brit even gets there, I love the models, and they all came out. Everybody had the different, like the Bronner type of hair shows they used to have back in the day. So they had, one was like a huge spider, another one was like a Bridgerton, like a huge queen. It had like Kenya Moore in the back of her hair, and another one. It was just very unique and creative, and I love stuff like that. So Kenya lined the models up, and she's like, we're gonna vote Apollo style. So they voted by applause, and the queen with the huge hair won. I love that. So that was the highlight, I feel like, of her opening. So like I said, all the ladies came to support her, and Brit came with a nice white bouquet of flowers, and Kenya was like, I don't want the flowers. And, she was like, take these, I'll give them to somebody who's homeless outside. And they're like, oh my gosh. So then Angela tries to save the card. She's like, nope, I don't want the card either. And, Kenya's like, I'm that B. I'll always be that B. I'm forever that B. I pay you dust. And she like blows a kiss of dust or whatever. So Brit realizes, listen, I'm not going to be able to get through to Kenya, at least not today. She's, putting on a show. She had a little couple sips of like Don Julio we saw in the back. Again, I wish she wouldn't have done that. I feel like that gave her some liquid courage that made her take things too far, way too far. But it is what it is. So Kenya, after making that grand speech and getting everybody's attention, she pulls out, like I have here in my screenshot, the billboards of Brit being intimate and performing intimate acts on a gentleman. Now, she said that she hired a private investigator, and that they were found online. So Kenya says that according to Georgia law and according to her own perspective, that's not considered revenge P. This is what I'll say, because Porsha was like, let me out of here. I don't want you to film me. Matter of fact, she told the cameraman, turn the camera off. I don't even want it to, look like I was even here. But, Bravo, they had their statement that, since this event happened, they decided to essentially part ways and stop filming Kenya. As we all know, she was put under suspension. I made a separate video about that. But this was just a bad decision. It was just not smart in the heat of the moment. The fact that she took the time to hire a private investigator, get those pictures printed, blow them up on billboards, and essentially blow up her own event, her own grand opening, is just, I can't think of anything worse. I really can't. Kenya, she has so much going for her, and it's just like, for whatever reason, unbeknownst to me, she continues to self-sabotage. And this is something that I know she wishes that she could take back, even though I'm sure she'll probably never say that. Or no, I think she did. She might have said that on the Tamron Hall show 4 months ago, and I made a video about that when she was on Tamron Hall, if you guys want to watch that. But she did say, she realizes that the error of her ways, right? That she realizes that she went a step too far. I feel like both of the ladies took it too far. Like if somebody doesn't want to hug you, Brit, you know what I mean? That's not a reason to be talking about I got pissed or I get pow pows and I got, whips and I got this and I got that, and going off on a tangent. Like, girl, just be like, okay, fine, and keep it moving, like we're all grown. And then if somebody, if you feel disrespected and you say, okay, I'm going to pay you dust, then pay them dust. Can you, like, don't give her an opportunity to use any type of ammunition against you, because that's exactly what happened. Stay gracious, get your money up, focus on your business, focus on your family, because I mean, now it's like, you're out of a job, you're out of $400,000, and I don't know how she's going to move forward. I'm sure she will. I'm sure she'll, figure it out and put the pieces together. Hopefully Mark can, come up with some type of revenue. But I mean, they have a daughter to raise, so hopefully they can figure something out. But this episode, it was the pinnacle that people have been talking about for months. And I wish that things would have gone differently, but it is what it is. So Kenya left. They're going to usher in Phaedra after she left Married to Medicine. And I will keep you guys posted. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. I will talk with you in the next one. Take care, Aces. Bye.